Analog horror. When I mention this name, you immediately think of the best known, such as Local 58, Mandela Catalogue, or even Gemini Home. But in this category, there are unknown analog horrors that can be as good and as disturbing as these. And in this video, I'll be talking about disturbing analog horrors you have never seen. And I'm Sir Chris. I explore the internet and I make videos about it. Let's go. The Fall Tapes. The Fall Tapes tells us about strange cases that happen in a town in Mississippi called Stroughton, and we understand what is happening in the city through police files. In 1985, the city police discovered a new species never seen before through our first homicide within the city, in which, from then on, they called it the Fault. The first victim was named Daniel Pleck, who before his death on April 9th, 2 days earlier, he reported to the police that while driving back home, the Fault tried to chase and attack his car, but luckily failed. With Daniel's description, we can see that the city was dealing with a creature twice the height of a human being and as intelligent, if not more than a human being. But the encounter with death did not end there, because 2 days later, as we said before, Daniel ends up dying by the same creature, coincidentally, on the same street where he had seen it and escaped for the first time. 2 weeks later, something macabre happens to Benny Lois. One day, Benny, a hunter, finds several carcasses of animals outside his hunting club that had not been killed by bullets or arrows. So, suspicious, he calls the police, and when they start to investigate, things only get worse. Huge footprints, heads on stakes, and even strange symbols on trees, which confirm it was made by the Fault, because the corpses ended up in the same condition that Daniel ended up with. And a week later, Benny is never seen again after leaving for a morning hunt. And the strangest thing is that this creature appears in the city, did what it did, and managed to hide and remain silent for 7 years. But it eventually broke the silence in 1992 with the death of the mayor of Stroughton, Martha Smith, which left the city scared and ended up with the statement that it would return. The most uncomfortable fact is that the creature is so intelligent to the point of being able to hunt humans, hide for 7 years without being found, and not go out and kill everything in sight. Definitely something disturbing, worth exploring. The Baroque Hour. The Baroque Hour tells about a cult which operates among the society and tries its best to remain silent, to the point that they communicate through the media with subliminal messages, as we can see in the first episode. In it, it shows us a television channel that at 2 AM shows a sinister program called the Baroque Hour, where in it, violin music plays. That after a few seconds, we can see the program distorting while showing us several unnerving images. That is, the messages of the cult. Until finally, the torture ends, for now. But for Smith, it was just the beginning. In the second episode, it shows us a call between Mr. Smith and Officer Johnson, where Smith explains what he saw that night on television, which we later see that it was a horrible idea. In the meantime, the police officer calls him a reject and a while Smith begs him to believe him. Imagine being in despair, and the officer just insults you. And why Ben Shapiro?
Officer, I hope you are joking. This is serious.
And of course, Smith dies that same night, as we can see that the police were involved with the cult, where anyone who was identified with a wake, that is, anyone who denounced the subliminal messages on television, would have to be eliminated, or else the cult would end up being discovered by society. But this cult is so infiltrated into society to the point where police, presidents, politicians, and millionaires are involved in the cult. The Watcher. The Watcher is an unfinished analog horror that, even though it's small, it's sweet. It begins with an emergency broadcast to 7 states in the United States. That same broadcast warns of several reports of a dangerous entity called the Watcher, and this entity is highly dangerous because it is incredibly intelligent, as it stalks its victims before attacking them. Their attacks consist of 3 phases on 3 different days. On the first day, the creature stalks its victims from afar in areas we wouldn't expect, to the point where victims only reported seeing something in the corner of their eye. On the second day, his presence was more evident, since from then on, the Watcher decided that you were his target. But on the third day, death is almost guaranteed, because that's when he attacks. But here comes the part about this creature being intelligent. Of course, stalking doesn't always mean that the creature is smart, but the Watcher normally only moves to the second stage when it is certain that the victim is vulnerable. In other words, he's not carrying a weapon, if he's blind, deaf, or even a child. Which means, if he sees the victim with a weapon, he leaves her alone. So much so that in the broadcast itself, they tell to call experts who will kill him if he returns. I love the fact that he's highly dangerous, but at the same time mortal. And yet, another reason for an American to carry a gun, because you're not even safe in your own house. MS.L. Analog horrors usually talk about hopeless scenarios, but what if that hopeless scenario were the voices in your head? MS.L. is an analog horror which tells us the story of a couple who met at work, where even after some problems, like the woman telling the man to disappear, he eventually arranges a date with her, and eventually they begin dating. And then we see him fighting the voices in his head, and this is very recurrent throughout the story, to the point where he ends up allegedly being threatened by her in arguments, while again he fights against the voices, where he fortunately wins, but all good things must come to an end eventually. One night, they both decide to go camping, and in that moment of tranquility, the voices appear again, saying the following.
What are you waiting for? Do it. Do it. Do it.
And he ends up her head, and the voices start saying that he was a murderer, and he must have loved doing that. Where next, they say that he was problematic, without medicine, and he has to go, because now it's too late. There are several interpretations that can be drawn from this, such as the fact that the man has some mental disorder, to the point that he would have to combat it with medicine. Until one night, he ends up hearing the voices, and did it thinking it would be free, but was totally the opposite. Silasorion. This one isn't a series, but rather a channel that looks like it's gonna have a series. The first video is called Starving.Help, which shows us a creature constantly banging against the glass, which it can't handle, and ends up getting cracked, while making noises similar to someone in pain. This character also appears in the third video, which shows the same creature banging against the television glass, while constantly trying to talk to whoever is in the other side. Disturbed, the man inside the room tries to communicate with the creature, and even says it to leave, which causes the creature to start banging violently against the glass, until it breaks and it leaves. And it quickly cuts to the view of a door as the victim tries to hide, but unfortunately, it was too late. Mythical Creatures. This one is strangely similar to the previous one, and you will see why. Mythical Creatures is a small analog horror created by Chilling Abyss, and it shows us a safety guide made for children, as recently reports of entities have increased, including mythical creatures. They usually hide behind closed doors and dark windows, and usually try to lure their victims at night through noises. If they are unsuccessful, they eventually stop, but if someone interacts with it, the individual now would have to survive 30 days, while the creature will try to offer something desirable, and each time you would say no, the creature will get more violent. And it's from here that I found a problem with his analog horror. I don't know if it was intentional that he didn't say what would happen if we accepted it, as that would also prevent us from taking any risks. Nobody knows, you don't want to be the first one, right? Or perhaps he forgot, who knows. But still, don't accept the gift. Where he then shows us a recording of a child who is woken up during the night due to one of those entities, which unfortunately, she interacts with it. Now in the last recording, we see the monster opening the bedroom door and looks directly at her, and she starts screaming. And whatever happened to her is still unknown. I said it was kinda similar to the previous one, because both videos consisted of a humanoid who tries to talk to whoever is in the other side, and those who interact with it don't end up well. Of course, there are several diamonds that can be found among the most popular ones. And since you watched to the very end, what about lost episodes that will ruin your childhood? Recently, the Walton Falls iceberg brought so many people, and I'm totally grateful for that. Thank you guys so much. And welcome everybody. And if you want to see these videos uncensored, check out Patreon, and take care, my friend.